Okay, well, welcome to our very last, not really, but but our very last panel discussion on the border trip that we just took a few months ago. To start, we are going to have a land acknowledgement by our very own sister, Michelle, who is going to come up, you're welcome to introduce yourself. I'm going to also just...
No, it ain't about me today.
Okay, you got
Michelle, y'all.
And she's one of our sisters also went to the border trip, as well as being a sister organization. Just love with Noya and Project Butterfly.
Our Voice Nuestra Voz acknowledges that we occupy the unceded ancestral homeland of the Chitimacha, Choctaw, Homa, Atacapa Ishak peoples, who are the original inhabitants of Bulbancha, South Louisiana. We recognize that the Chitimacha, Choctaw, Homa, Atacapa Ishak understand the interconnectedness of all things and have maintained harmony with nature and water for millennia. We honor the Chitimacha, Choctaw, Homa, Atacapa Ishak peoples for their enduring commitment to Mother Earth. As the indigenous protectors of this land, and in accordance with their traditions, the Chitimacha, Choctaw, Homa, Atacapa Ishak have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. We recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. As uninvited guests, we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples and wish to pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives. We recognize to respectfully honor the Chitimacha, Choctaw, Homa, Atacapa, Ishak peoples. We must embrace and collaborate meaningfully to record indigenous knowledge and how we care for South Louisiana and all its people. We recognize our debt to exploited workers, past and present, whose labor was and continues to be stolen through unjust practices. We respectfully acknowledge our debt to the enslaved people, primarily of African descent, whose labor and suffering built and grew the economy and infrastructure of a city and nation that refused to recognize their humanity. We also acknowledge that many indigenous groups native to the Americas were also enslaved at the hands of settlers during colonization.
Thank you so much for that. Well, I always like to start with that, one, to just ground us in the space and where we are, and hopefully to also allow us a little bit of, I don't want to say time traveling, but to allow us the ability to understand that what we're experiencing today in 2023 is not just this, right? There's been so much that has happened, and also hopefully allows us the opportunity for some hope to be able to create a new future, as well as create space in all of our movements to hopefully give the land back. And so thank you so much. Today's theme is fighting for justice. So we have all of our justice fighting family up here who was on the trip, and we'll get into bios in a second. And so we'll get a little bit into that. I also wanted to, I think everybody knows or was invited by someone at the organization, but if you weren't, I happen to have the pleasure of leading our Voice Nuestra Voz for the last 8 years. I co-founded the organization. Our Voice Nuestra Voz is a nation-building organization. We build power and solidarity between Black and Brown people, and we fight for justice. And hopefully, look, we build campaigns and we win them, period. Okay, so let's see. Our panelists. To my left is my good brother, Homero Lopez, who is a dad, first and foremost, and who is also a lawyer, a freedom fighter. You could catch him on I-10 for hours, for hours, going to do the work of freeing people who are in detention and fighting for people's asylum. He is also a professor at Tulane.
And Loyola.
And Loyola. Oh, excuse me. And then once we come back around, I would love for y'all to just share like one thing that is personal, because part of what we want to also do on this panel is get to know who the freedom fighters are, right? Usually we think about all of the freedom fighters, say, that have come before us, or even people who are in our community, and we always think about them in sort of that capacity. But these people are also like parents, are also, you know, so many other things. Like my sister Kristen, who is also a doula, also a lawyer, and also a mama, and a writer, and all the things, a fashionista, period. And so welcome and thank you. To the left of her, we have the very distinguished Mr. Ernest Johnson, who we love and honor, who leads Ubuntu Village, and who is, look, I don't want to tell all your business, but who is also a part of, one more time, Social Aid and Pleasure Club. So you can catch him doing all the things, right? Yeah. Oh, okay, look, I'm not speaking out of turn. And then we have Will Snowden, who is also a lawyer, former public defender, also a professor at Loyola, and is what should I say? Our favorite Facebook celloist influencer. Can we say that?
Also one hell of a space player.
Yes, yes. Okay, so we'll start with Will, and then we'll come down. Just share something that, like, let the people know, because we're going to get into the heavy stuff. So let's at least start with a little bit of light, you know, just something fun about yourself. And it's going to be hard because I already shared, you know,
Well, I always say I'm the proud son of Billy Ray and Kay Snowden. They were both Milwaukee public school teachers. They're now retired, but still do some teaching in Dallas, Texas. I'm the youngest of, there's 4 kids. I'm the baby boy, as my sisters would say. I have 3 older sisters. They would say that I'm spoiled. I would say that they're lying. They would say that I'm my mom's favorite, and I would also would also reject that. But I share that because I love my family, and I think the lessons that I've learned from my parents growing up, not only as them formally being teachers, but also just kind of teachers within our family, has guided the great work that I'm able to do today.
So besides being part of One More Time, a Social and Pleasure Club, I had the opportunity to grow up in the Lafitte Housing Development, which is located in the Trimmy area. And as I look back about how we have now created Ubuntu Village, I always look back to that community because it was such a caring community, and it was really a village that we took care of each other. We didn't know we were poor. We shared everything, and it was just a loving community. So I always reflect on my past and stand on the shoulders of my ancestors and the people who I grew up with, and always try to look at humanity from the reflections of the individual that we're talking to or we're working with, and always in having empathy in a way that supports love and peace, and bring me to the second line. I'm gonna have some fun, right? Just this abundance of joy that lives in our community.
No, that's right. Plus one to what both of Will and Mr. J said. I'm born and raised in New Orleans, big on family. I too am the baby of my family. I'm the baby cousin, I'm the baby sister. So definitely feel that energy. Family super important to me. Also, deeply connected to my ancestral lineage here in New Orleans. My grandfather, Roy Rome, was a freedom fighter himself, and so I feel very responsible for carrying that legacy. I guess what I could share is kind of what I'm like been focusing on, ideating around lately, in that like I've been doing a lot of thought about like ego and like the purpose of ego, and like, do I need an ego? If I do need it, what am I supposed to be using it for? And like really trying to like sit with my ego, talk to it, figure out what it wants to do, so that I can like have it chill, so that I can like, you know, be more in community with people and be more invested in the work that I'm doing. So that's kind of what I've been like thinking about lately. Just different parts of myself, getting to know different parts of myself, and really feeling like, you know, there are conventions or like benchmarks that I was taught to reach, like go to college, go to law school, become a lawyer, all of these things, and I've done those things. And so now really excited and open to be like, oh, now it's time to just have fun and just like allow life to bring me what it's supposed to be. And so in that vein, being like, and your ego gotta chill, like before you start doing the fun stuff. So that's what I've been thinking about.
I was supposed to be the baby, and then my little sister didn't really follow through on that. I guess my mom. So we'll put the blame on. I am I guess, resident of nowhere and everywhere. I was the child of a migrant, or I am the child of a migrant worker, and she moved around all over the place. So there was never like a permanent home necessarily, but home was more that community. And so that community of working and living within migrant communities, same thing, you know, as Mr. Ernest, right? We didn't know we were poor. It was fun. It was great. You know, working in that space has been what motivates me and what keeps me going on doing this kind of work.
Thank you.
Oh,
Should I share something?
yeah.
Oh, let me share something. I just had a birthday. Yes, given Virgo season. I am really, somebody told me today, I don't know who it was, but they said, we've never seen you dress down. And I'm like, I always dress down. But, you know, I also like to give it a little look. We just not giving one today. I was giving chill. It's giving chill. It's giving chill. It's giving chill. But yeah, I am really, I would say my fun fact, because y'all went deep, you know. But I would say my fun fact is, I think I'm so in love with myself and with us, right? Black and brown people. Like, I just think the world of us. I just think that we are so beautiful inside and out. And I'm like, I just want everyone to have a photo shoot. I want everyone to wear, like, you know, be in their true expression and like just shine. I think that's like my focus, and has been my focus and will be my focus. Partly because my mom, who's now an ancestor, it was so hard to find pictures of her, like, to put in the program, to be honest. It was like hard to find a picture of her by herself, hard to find a picture, and she loved herself, she loved her body, but it was just really difficult. So I think I'm like, photo shoot, you get a photo shoot, you get a photo shoot, everybody gets a photo shoot. Anyway, so that's my fun fact. I'll share a little bit about why we as an organization decided to go on this border trip. One, I'd been trying to do it for years and years and years. And then there came Ty Davis, who executed on the idea along with the rest of our team. But she definitely led it, and it was. I was like, oh yeah, like I want this to be one of your first projects. She's like, okay, say less, and then it happened, right? And then it was like, oh well, here, let me see the credit card. We got to start buying the tickets. I was like, wait, what? But we really went on the trip because I live and straddle this world of, being a Black and brown person, and like I'm always like, no, like there's a shared story here, there's a shared agenda, there's something that we can do together. Like if we just see ourselves, if we just see each other, like I promise we can move mountains. And I like really live in that idea, or in that knowing. And so that's sort of what prompted the trip, being in New Orleans, being from California originally, but being in New Orleans and seeing that we share a lot of the same issues, right? And how do we sort of, for a second, be able to, tell our stories and listen and hopefully work through some of the anti-Blackness, hopefully work through some of the xenophobia so that we can, listen, be present, and also, see how there's a lot of shared experience. So that sort of, was the big purpose, or not big purpose, but sort of the why. And then to be able to come back here and to run campaigns together and to say like, hey, these campaigns sort of benefit the same and same groups of folks. And then knowing that Black people are criminalized every day. Now, if you're a Black migrant, you also criminalized every day. And so there was a lot of work to be done there. And I had been hearing a lot of stories from Homero and his team about the work that they were doing in Louisiana, and then just knowing that, okay, we have always been the mass incarceration capital. I won't say always, but we have been the mass incarceration capital. And now we are still the mass incarceration capital, but plus detention, right? And so Louisiana has become the number 2 behind Texas in housing, not housing, but detaining people. And I was like, yeah, that can't happen. Like, we have to do something. And so this trip was a part of kind of embarking on this transformational experience of Black and brown solidarity and us learning about this issue of immigration. And so a part of us preparing, we did some readings, and I'm going to just share literally one quote, so one sentence, so bear with me. But a part of the reading that we did, and part of us understanding sort of transnational solidarity and why should we care about Black people all over the world, right? And why should we care about people's struggle across borders, came from Angela Davis' book, Freedom is a Constant Struggle. And she talks about transnational solidarity, but this is one of the quotes that kind of really always stays with me. Our histories never unfold in isolation. We cannot truly tell what we consider to be our own histories without knowing the histories of others. And often we discover that those other stories are actually our own stories. And so with that, I want to just start off and knowing that we'll be doing a lot of, both traveling to the border and remembering what we experienced, but then also weaving that with some of the work that you all do as advocates, as freedom fighters, as lawyers. Does that work? Yeah, cool. All right, I want to start with Will. Right. No, go first with Will. Go first with Will. So what y'all don't know about Will is also an amazing orator, storyteller, like griot. So Will, look, paint the picture, Will. What happened? What did you see? What was see? And then he gets to tell it. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. The people need to know. We also really fell in love with each other. So go ahead, Will.
On one of the very first days, we were able to kind of just gather as a community outside, burning some sage to kind of get our minds and spirits ready for what we were going to experience over those next couple of days. And in the distance, kind of like off in the hills, you see this huge metal structure. And you'll see it in one of the pictures, and it actually was the wall. And I remember some of us had begun to see it, and for me, I'd always heard of, quote unquote, the wall, right? It was kind of this mythical, imaginatory thing But when you could actually lay eyes on it, it cemented this reality of separation and this false separation, right? You think about how on each side of the wall mirrors each other as it relates to the types of flowers, the types of grass, the types of plants, the types of animals that might pass through that area, but then also the mirroring of the types of people and the humanity that exists within those people. That wasn't the only time we saw the wall. We went to another location where we saw the wall extend into the ocean. And just thinking how silly it is in terms of constructing this, and there's also a picture of it, constructing this wall that goes into the water because we're so obsessed with this idea of separation. So one of the things that was cemented for me is understanding this idea of international separation, but also thinking about how that separation replicates itself in the United States and how we are obsessed with classifying people. We can either classify people based on what they look like, we can classify people based on the things that they believe, we can classify people based on the things that they don't have and how they survive living in poverty. And what was really striking for me in the different things we were able to experience, the different things we were able to see, and the different people we were able to speak to, is how the struggle isn't as different as some people would want you to believe. And so that was one of the very first things that I recognized, is a similarity in the struggle that's happening on an international level that also gets replicated in our own country.
Thank you. Kristen, would you mind sharing with us, like, if you had to define, like, what the fight was that you saw out there?
So I think what the fight that I saw the most of, and was similar to what Will said, you begin to realize, like, it's not that different. And so what I saw is people just, like, in need of the most basic things. And by that I mean, like, we came into contact with, when we went to visit, we went to, I can't think of what the Haitian camp was called, Bridge, what is it? Haitian Bridge Alliance. So we went there and we visited with some migrants, and, you know, they told us about all the things that they were doing, how many, you know, some of them had to walk across many countries to get where they were. And, you know, very easily, like, my mind started thinking about, like, you know, oh, housing, clothing, food, like, all of these things. And at one point, one of the men was, like, very clear, like, we actually don't need a whole lot from y'all. What we need is some mental health support. And so, like, recognizing that, like, and seeing that from all the people that we talked to, no matter what they talked about, being able to not finish a sentence because they would break into tears, or just seeing the struggle in their eyes, seeing how difficult it was for them to hold it all together, but perhaps they needed to hold it all together because they had children with them or because they had their partners with them, or all of these things. But realizing that, like, the big thing that people needed was, like, support to know that they were okay. Like, they needed support for their minds. And that was really the biggest thing, and also the thing that made me really, really realize, like, our struggles are not very different at all. Our struggles are pretty similar.
We partnered with a couple of organizations, and one of them was the Haitian Bridge Alliance. We were able to go to one of their camps and or shelters, right? But it was more of an encampment, and we met with folks who had taken this journey, and they talked about, you know, the journey, but all they really, I think, like you said, wanted was to be well, but also to, on some level, they weren't even, I mean, these people had walked through the jungle, right, for days, 8 days, 12 days. And I think a lot about, as someone who is I guess, is it my first generation, Homero?
Are we speaking academically? Because I
I
think
don't
you're
know.
technically second generation.
Oh, don't do me
Your
that.
parents are considered first.
Okay, well, okay, my parents were born in another country, they came here. I be thinking I'm first generation, okay. But we gonna, look, professor, but here's what I'll say. I think of, like, there's just, we're not even talking about just building understanding with Black American people, right? That's kind of what we think about, right? It's like, oh, building Black and brown solidarity. You're trying to build the understanding of Black American people. It's like, nah, people who are first generation, I guess technically second generation, respectfully, we don't know shit either. Like we act like we have just forgotten, and we start, voting Republican. Anyway, I don't want to, get off into that. But we start, or I guess, voting and moving in ways that are not aligned with the collective experience of our people. And so I want to just start to weave some of that. So I'd love to come to you, Homero, to talk about your experience as being a child of a migrant worker and, starting from, I guess, just along with the season, starting from the border in Texas and moving your way all the way up to, my understanding, your family went all the way to Washington, right? Washington State?
No, we were in the Midwest. We were mostly
okay.
in Illinois, Nebraska, Colorado.
Oh, okay. We'll get into it, brother.
That's all right. But yeah, that was my upbringing, right? Lived in South Texas on the border. Most of my family lives on either side of the border. And then we would come the season, you follow the crops, and so you go up. And in places, and when you think about how policy-wise you can build that into the system, in South Texas, you have migrant classes where they will start you on a curriculum in a certain way because they know you're going to leave. And then when you come back late in the year's not over yet, they put you into that curriculum. So they have it set up recognizing a significant population a significant chunk of our population is going to be leaving and coming back, and we can't throw them in and out of the same groups. And the same thing existed in Colorado, and the same thing existed in Nebraska, where they had it set up to where they were basically communicating with each other to make sure that the children weren't falling behind, right? In a way of not letting that go and recognizing what your community is and making sure that you structure the needs to those communities. So from my personal experience, that's something that I got to experience as a child. I didn't really recognize it until looking back on it now. Because back then it was like, well, no, I want to be with the other kids. Like, why am I only with the same 15 kids all the time? But looking back on it, it's not like, oh yeah, that really helped because it was able to keep me on track, given that I was jumping in and out of schools and going into different levels I would have been thrown into different levels and probably would have ended up failing out or something, because that's what ends up happening when you don't take that into account. But getting a little bit more to what Mary was addressing, there was a moment when we crossed into Tijuana and we were in the good van. So in the good van, there was a moment when we were crossing over and there's a statue of Abraham Lincoln. And I remember Michelle being like, why the hell is there a statue of Abraham Lincoln? And when you think of it from in the U.S., when you think of Black Americans and the view of Abraham Lincoln, particularly with the more modern interpretation of him, recognizing everything that he did say and where he, Emancipation Proclamation, right, Civil War and whatnot, but at the same time, he wanted to deport every single African back to Africa. He wanted to create a colony. That was where he stood. He wasn't an abolitionist from the get. That wasn't his approach. That wasn't where he was going with it. But in contrast, in Mexico, what you have is a country that started its constitution with abolition built into the constitution. And so you've got a country that recognizes and sees this image of a person who's freeing folks in America. And it's a different interpretation. It's a different perspective of it. And I remember we had a really good conversation in that drive, having that conversation of how things are viewed differently, how there is this different interpretation of different historical figures based off of where you come from and where you're going with that. Again, the fight, the purpose wasn't Abraham Lincoln. It's abolition. Right? That's what you're aiming for. That's what you're struggling for. The first president of Mexico, Guerrero, was an Afro-Mexican, an Afro-Indigenous man he's the first African president in the Americas, right? You have Benito Juarez, who's the first indigenous president in the Americas. And so you've got this history of that taking place. And then you've got this bigger power coming in and being like, yeah, no, we really can't have that. Same thing that happened with Haiti, same thing that happened with Cuba, same thing that you get that constantly happens of squashing these movements. And so we need to continue to work that together of together we're more powerful, together we can we have that same experience and we can move it forward if we continue to focus on it's this issue more than it is this individual or this particular person or whatever.
Thank you. I want to move to Mr. Ernest. You have such a heart for the young people, Mr. Ernest. And we were able to connect and meet with young people out there. And I would love for you to just share just kind of some of what we saw and what we heard, as well as how you might think that connects with the struggles here of young Black children.
Yes. I think one of the first things that I recognized once we crossed the border and was in some of the camps, that there are a number of young people, and listening to their stories about this journey they were taking to so much a land of freedom that we live in. And it's just, it was complicated to digest, because yet we fight in this country for justice, and young people are risking their lives to take this specific journey to come to this country. And it was really, it didn't really sit in on me at the time that the young people were experiencing some of the same similar issues that we see here in America, where in America kids are more comfortable in their skin about what happens and how it happens. But the kids there were really vigilant, right, about their specific freedom and why they wanted it, right? It was just this different yearning in their voices, and it wasn't from a place of feeling sorrow or sympathy about them. They wanted freedom, and the complications that they face, I don't know if an everyday American can endure it if they were searching for their freedom the same way. So the direct interconnection between trying to fight for justice and fight for freedom gave me a little bit more hope and gave me to be more bold about what and how we do things in America, right? And how do we treat our children, right? When here there are children fighting for their freedom and don't need they don't need a PlayStation, right? They don't need the social media or the technology, that we have. And what was surprisingly, despite everything that they yearn for, what they did have, what a line of communication, right? Everyone had cell phones, right? I took it as though if you hadn't took this journey that you wouldn't have the necessities, but they had the necessary tools to communicate in a way with each other so that they can continue on that specific journey to freedom.
I think a lot about, and actually Tomek, who is on our team, we talked at our check-in today. He was like, "Oh yeah, we're preparing this panel. We always got a panel going on. We always got an event going on." But it was like thinking about migration and very expansive, right? Because we tend to think about immigration, migration, and then we get to undocumented. But it's yes, and the Great Migration was hell Black people moving to north, south, and so there are all these similarities, right, as to why people leave, why it could be economic reasons, it could be political reasons, it could, probably unpopular opinion, but even transplants, right? You going somewhere to do some things, and very different because I think, we may not be walking through a jungle for 8 and 12 days, right? But I think that there are a lot of reasons why folks leave, and I would love to, especially, one of the ways that we prepared was learning a lot about Haiti and learning a lot about Haiti's specific political and significance to Black people globally, as being the first place where Black people fought for their freedom and won it, right? And so most of the folks who we encountered were either Haitian or like from Ghana or other parts in West Africa. And so I would love to just hear if anyone has any sort of wants to share on just the connection to Haiti and to specifically what we learned and what we believe in preparation, but then also how folks were talking about their experience and like truly wanting to leave Haiti to go anywhere that was safe. Not sharing this through it.
I think what I can share is just that I realized, and I noticed in a way, in a way that like what we receive here in America is filtered. And so for one, you didn't ask this, but I'll say it. For one, I didn't expect to cross the border and see a bunch of Black people. That's not what I expected. That's not what I'm seeing when I'm hearing about migration on television. So one, that was a big shock to me. But two, we hear so little about what is happening in Haiti. And certainly that is intentional, right? Because of this is a powerful people. This is a people who has a history of like, we gonna take what's ours, kicking the French out. And so one thing that we heard, I guess going there, what I kind of thought or like heard was that like, oh, it is bad in Haiti. Whatever that means, it's bad. People trying to get out of Haiti, whatever that means. And one of my best friend's husband is Haitian, born in Haiti, still has family there. And even from her, I would hear like, oh yeah, it's bad. His family's trying to get to the States, but never really like, oh, okay, it's bad. But I remember we were talking to someone there, and I don't remember exactly when, but they described it as like, no, it's like, do not come out your house on Tuesday. If you come out your house on Tuesday, it will be trouble for you. You will likely lose your life. And so like to hear it in that way, like I think for me made it like, yo, like what are we doing if we are like not providing space for these people to like, for people who are like literally can't come out their house on certain days? Like if we're not thinking of creating space and safety for them, like what kind of world are we actually living in? And then I think also like the other thing that made me know that like, or just kind of like, I don't know, like messed me up in a real way, was like realizing what people were going through to get to safety. And once you knew what people were going through to get to safety, it became very clear that like, actually, I don't even need to know what's happening. I know if you did that, you needed safety, and that's what's important. And so what we were hearing were like, Mary said like 8 days in the jungle, but like to be clear, that is a fraction of the entire journey. That's the most dangerous part of the journey for many people, but it's a fraction of the journey. And so just thinking about, like Mr. J said, the things that we're fighting for and the freedoms that we as Black and brown people in America are fighting to achieve, as important as they are, it's like that is just so much bigger than what I ever imagined it would be. And I think that was like a really big shift for me to recognize the journey that people were taking, that people were literally walking across 8-9 countries over months that people were like on that journey, losing many of their friends and being like, all right, come on, we got to get it. We got to keep moving. Because they didn't have another choice. They needed to do that.
I just wanted to share a reflection as it relates to Kristen commenting on when we crossed the border. I too did not expect to see as many dark-skinned black people as we saw. And the technology that is utilized as part of the process seeking asylum coming into the United States is not prepared for those dark-skinned people to be applying either. We spoke with some folks who use, I forgot the name of the app, but they essentially use an app. They try to find a secure source of Wi-Fi, and they're literally waiting for the time to hit 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is, to refresh their screen as quickly as possible, enter in the information of themselves, their family members, and whomever else they are with. And then they have to take a picture or something along the lines where the camera has to recognize their features. And the darker-skinned migrants were not recognized by the technology. And thinking about how you make this, months-long journey, some people traveling for longer than that, to not be able to fulfill and complete your trip because a damn app cannot recognize your Afrocentric features. When we think about the conversation and the narrative that is being told about the migrants coming into the United States, it's often cast in a way where it focuses us, or asks us, or demands us, or distracts us to try to focus on the quote-unquote problem in front of us, which is often mislabeled as individuals. All right, we think about a previous president's description of individuals migrating, calling them murderers, calling them rapists, calling them people who are going to steal your jobs, right? It's easy to focus on the quote-unquote problem in front of us, which is often mislabeled as individuals, and it's more difficult to focus on the problems that are creating the problems in front of us, which are corrupt governments, which are countries who have been destabilized by involvement from the United States government. And if we think about what's happening in Haiti, people will say, well, why should I be concerned about what's happening in Haiti? That's not the United States. Well, if we're concerned about what's happening in Haiti, perhaps we would not have as many people trying to come to the United States in the first place. If we can authorize millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to invest in Ukraine and defending that as a country, why are we not able to do similar investments of aid to countries who are more nearby to the United States that actually might have more of a connection to this land and this space in terms of proximity? Why don't we have that parity of investment in our foreign affairs? So when I think about the frustration people have to have gone through to survive the treacherous jungle, to survive these rattlesnakes in the desert, to survive dehydration just to get here, and then an app says, sorry, we can't recognize your face, it has to be heartbreaking for all those people on that journey.
Yeah, I would just like to add to the app, one of the things we recognized also was like the timing and the framing of you getting on the app and actually getting your application in, right? So if it's a family of 4, there's a possibility because such the influctuation of people trying to get on the app that I may get through. But then it leaves my other kids or siblings left out and not be able to get through. So there's a decision that needs to be made at that particular time. And what we have, in talking to some of the folks there, they were saying that my wife is over there, my children is over in the States, but yet I'm still stuck here in Mexico. So it reminds me of any parent being separated from their family and how that will feel when you're talking about looking at walls and this app. And it really tripped me out of going across the border, like the security, right? Like it's really heavy, right? Upon bringing something back or getting back over. And it was like, I never forget, the sorrow that some of us took with us after we left Mexico. but it was my sister Michelle was like, we were saying like they sleeping in cots and they're sleeping on the ground, and Michelle vividly reminded us that like we've been through the struggle too. We deserve to live and sleep in a bed, and that's the freedom that they're seeking to have. So yes, it was. When I think about it, it's just it can be saddening, but it can be inspiring for the work that we do.
And I want Homero to jump in and share a little bit about like why are people even going through an app to seek asylum, right? It's actually there's a reason behind it, and then to share a little bit about moving into what is happening here in Louisiana and what is happening, why folks have to. The idea of asylum and why people seek asylum and legally, right? Not sort of the reasons why people want to flee their home, right, in their home country, but legally. Okay, so folks are, applying for asylum and the process there, but then also once you get there, or once you either get asylum, very few people do, but then if you are detained, what's the legal process, what's the rights, what's the probability of a judge, particularly in Louisiana, because this is where you're at, but a judge in Louisiana in this red state, right, hearing your case and saying, yep, we're going to grant you asylum. And I say that because I met with a lot of lawyers on the advance trip that I took to, to prepare for the group going. And a lot of people are also leaving, not just political persecution, but also because they're trans or because they're queer, and they're trying to. Can you imagine? One thing we haven't talked about is anti-Blackness in Mexico specifically, or in all of the Latin American countries that you have to travel to get to a border state or border country like Mexico, right? But there's just so many issues, and there's so much, layers of things that are happening. But imagine a white evangelist or Christian judge from rural Louisiana, I don't care that you're a trans Black, what I mean? Like, they saying no. But even so, it's so hard to even get to the place where you can get legal representation. I'm going to stop there.
That's right. So the reason that the app exists is the Biden administration has put a cap on how many people per day can come into the country under seeking asylum, which is a legal right. We have the right, when people say do it the legal way, the Immigration and Nationality Act, which governs immigration law in the United States, says that you have to physically be in the United States in order to seek asylum, and that it doesn't matter how you came in. It's like as though they thought that through and said, we don't really care how you enter. It's a legal mechanism to come into the United States and to seek asylum. And so there's this app that says basically if you don't go through the app, there's a presumption that you are not actually, there's a negative presumption against you that you then have to overcome. And so people are waiting, again, people trying to do it, quote unquote, the legal way, right? Trying to do it the right way. But there's a cap. And then there's the additional issues, as Will pointed out, where the app is built, anytime the government builds an app, it's generally not going to go all that well. And then it's built with these biases built into it, right? Where it doesn't, I remember some colleagues from California telling us like they would set up these really bright lights to try to make sure that the app would capture people's skin color, because the darker the skin color, the less likely the app captures it. And so that's just the way that it was working. And so they're trying to find ways to work around it. But then when you show up, you also have to match the picture that was taken in the app. And so if you've got this really bright light on you, everyone are like, that's not you. And so there's this aspect that comes to it. And it's a dehumanization aspect. It's the same thing as when we're dropping drones on folks from far away as though we're playing a video game. It creates this distance where you don't actually have to view people, right? In immigration court in Louisiana, in the detention centers, most of the judges appear via televideo. And so they don't have to physically be there engaging with people who are seeking asylum or seeking any kind of relief to stay in the country. They can do it from far away. They can be removed. They're on Zoom in their house, taking notes, not even really looking at the person. And so that's where we're moving. Technology can be great, and it could be used in a way that would be very effective to process folks, to get people in, to get them approved, to get them situated, get them connected with other folks. As Mr. Ernest mentioned, everybody had cell phones to stay connected with each other, but they also had cell phones because they needed it. They have to have it in order to be able to access that app. Otherwise, you can't come in, right? They're stopping you from doing that, or you're going through a much more difficult process to get in. So that much more difficult process, where the border gets brought to Louisiana, is people enter at the border, not through a port of entry, not through a legal crossing or going through a proper, what they're saying is the proper mechanism, and therefore you get detained. You get sent to a jail, because it's a jail. We can call it a detention center. We can call it a family residential facility. It's a jail, right? And so when you go there and then you're detained in central, rural, isolated Louisiana, where it's 3 to 4 to 5 hours from any major metropolitan area, no offense, Baton Rouge, and so you're detained in these very rural areas with judges who, by the way, they're not really judges, right?
Can you explain who are the judges?
Yeah, so immigration court is not an independent court. It's not what we think of when we think of courts that are, if we get really technical, right, under the Constitution, Article 3, they fall 100% within the executive branch. So the immigration courts are within the Department of Justice. And the person that hires the immigration judges is the Attorney General of the United States, who's appointed by the President of the United States. And so when Sessions, after Trump took over, when he gave his first speech to his first class of immigration judges, he literally in that speech says that immigration attorneys are dirty immigration attorneys, hence I have a shirt that says dirty immigration lawyer, are telling asylum seekers the magic words so that they'll get released and they can get into the country. And it's your job to stop that from happening. It's your job to find the fraud. And so when that's the perspective, when the politics gets put into the law in that level, you kind of don't have a shot. On top of that, in immigration court, you're not entitled to an attorney. You have the right to an attorney, but if you can't afford one will most definitely not be provided for you. And so in the detained setting in Louisiana, there's a 26% representation rate. So 1/4 of people who go in front of these judges have an attorney with them, helping them work through what is the second most regulated area of law in the country, next to tax law. And so you got to go through this process by yourself while you're locked up, not having access to any kind of legal authority or any kind of legal analysis or being able to do the work yourself. Really, you get 2 hours to go to the library, to the law library in a day, and that's based off of the detention center sending you or letting you go. And there's a government attorney who's arguing against you throughout that entire process. And most of the immigration judges, I'll say that in quotations, are former government attorneys who got then appointed to become immigration judges. And so you've got the system set up in a way where, getting to Mary's point, the highest level of approval for asylum in Louisiana from any judge is a 18% approval rate. So 8.
Feels like 8.
I'm including the non-detained court here in New Orleans. And so any judge in Louisiana, the highest level of approval rate is an 18% approval rate. On average, they're above 90% denial rates. And we used to have a judge who, fortunately, has resigned or retired, who had a 99.9% denial rate. She had denied over 200 cases over the last 7 years before she retired, straight. And so that's the setting that you're dealing with. So folks get stopped at the border, get sent to Louisiana, to places that used to be jails before the criminal justice reform bills in 2017. They empty out some of those jails. ICE comes in and says, hey, we'll pay you double what the state used to pay you. Just slap a new paint job on this thing, rename it a detention center, and we'll bring you in immigrants instead of people who have been convicted for low-level crimes in the state. And the parish makes a ton of money off of it. It continues to employ, and it continues with this being the highest incarceration rate in the country or in the world.
And can I also ask or add that people like you and the clinics are far few between, and if you're lucky enough to get a lawyer, it'll cost you $10,000.
Yeah.
We're going to open it up for questions in a second. No, thank you. That's where we were going. So.
Las cuatro leyes por las que nosotros el documentado tenemos que aplicar para el asilo.
Diga.
No, que lo diga él, él es el abogado.
Oh, okay.
Cuando dice las 4 leyes,
No, son los 4 obstáculos que ellos ponen. Anteriormente habían 5, ahora son menos.
de los grupos de los que uno tiene que... Oh, okay. Siguen siendo 5, pero es complicado. So she's asking what are the categories under which people can, to let y'all know what the categories under which people can seek asylum. So in order to prove asylum and in order to get asylum in the United States, you have to prove that you've been persecuted in your home country, which has a whole legal definition to itself, or you're likely to be persecuted in the future on account of one of 5 reasons. It has to be for your race, your nationality, your religion, your political opinion, or because of you're a member of a particular social group. That's the catch-all phrase, right? It lets you create a group, and there's a ton of law around what is a particular social group. How is it defined? It has to be very narrowly, not overly narrowly defined, but not too broad. It can't include everybody, but it can include too few people. So it's a very convoluted, over-regulated system that you kind of need a lawyer, given the way it's been built, the way the system is built. You need a lawyer, but it doesn't set up for you to have a lawyer. And to add a little bit on the previous question, I would even ask, right, as Kristen said, someone who has gone through that, who has risked that much, shouldn't we just be welcoming somebody in that situation? And when we think of people fleeing their country, when we think of people seeking asylum and leaving and fleeing, we generally think, and one of the things we hear a lot, and I remember during the trip, hearing a lot of folks saying like, oh wow, people have cell phones? Or when the caravans are coming and you hear Fox News being like, look at them wearing brand new Nikes and like this clothes and whatnot. It's like, why do we have this expectation that people have to be in the absolute most miserable, dire straits in order to be deserving, to be deserving of mercy and grace and welcoming as a human being? Which again, to me, comes to this dehumanization aspect of we don't want, particularly certain groups of folks, to come to the United States. And by we, I mean the broader we. The royal we.
I think that is it. Maybe if you all can go on and just share your organization or an organization that you want to uplift so that you can also get follows, donations, all of the things.
ISLA Immigration, our handle is ISLA Immigration, ISLA Immigration. Like I said earlier, we provide legal services to folks who are detained.
Louisiana Center for Children's Rights. You can find us on socials at lakidsrights.org. We're the juvenile public defender for New Orleans, and we do statewide advocacy for incarcerated young people. Please follow us on socials, donate. Also, if you know an attorney who needs a job, we are very desperately in need of attorneys to come and fight with us to get these children out of jail and keep them out of jail, and to also make sure that they have everything that they need to be prosperous and thrive in their community. So if you know an attorney who's looking for employment, we are hiring attorneys right now.
Yeah, we are Ubuntu Village Loyola, and that means I am because we try to have a holistic approach in our work. And over the last 7 years, we have worked with parents and young people who was impacted by the juvenile justice system. And some folks may believe that 7 years is a year of completion. I was thinking I was going to be taking an exit, but our organization is shifting to in partnership with UMC and the health department and a number of nonprofit organizations around ending community violence and taking a more holistic approach from the root causes and being intentional about the communities that we're going to be working in.
Did you get folks over there who signed up?
Support us, and we're on all the social media
with the hat,
platforms.
with the hat. Can you get his?
If you cannot support us in any kind of way, as in involuntary or monetary ways, I would ask you that you lift it up to whatever power that you believe in, and that you do, and you talk to people in your community to end this cycle of violence.
Lift Up the Juror Project, which is a nonprofit I started to increase diversity of jury panels and improve people's perspective of jury duty. As a public defender for 5 years, I recognized that our juries were lacking diversity, and that lack of diversity would lead to a lack of fairness. So what I do with the Juror Project is I educate folks in the community to understand the power that exists in that jury deliberation room, and to make sure that we have more black and brown faces. Part of that conversation that takes place amongst the jury, because there's a lot of power in that room, and too often we're discarding it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. Have a beautiful night. If you need some more water, you need some more, I don't know if there's food, but wine, please take some. Thank you so much. We are grateful for you, and have a beautiful night.